Following the success of the Crossbill DVD, I've had a lot of people ask me about making a DVD on breeding bullfinches. This year we've managed to do just that. We obtained enough footage to compile a DVD about breeding bullfinches, along with some mealy redpoll footage and some nice hybrids. We produced goldfinch cross redpoll, goldfinch bullfinch and redpoll bullfinch. We managed to produce cocks in all three, so we were very lucky in that respect, and hopefully some of these birds will be seen on the show bench later this year, although unfortunately not by me, because I don't show, I don't get time. I hope you enjoy the DVD, and I'm sure that everybody will find enough information off this to put it to good use. Whether you're just starting out with bullfinches or you've been breeding them for years, there's something on here I'm sure that you can find of value. The worst thing you can do during the winter months is overfeed the bullfinches. If you ever go abroad and you see the continentals, if they have to catch a bird up for any reason to clean its feet, to clean its tail, they always check it for fat, and that's what we must do over here. Don't overfeed them, just keep them on a basic mixed canary seed and give them plenty of apple and broccoli, and it'll keep them a lot healthier than giving them loads of different kinds of seeds. They don't need it. I split the broccoli because they enjoy eating the stalks as much as the leaves themselves. It's better and cheaper if you grow your own broccoli because you can give them the whole plant, including the stalks and the bigger leaves. The aviary size that we use is generally 3 foot wide, 6 foot high and 6 foot deep, and the amount of cover that you put in, it's up to you. If you're breeding British bullfinches, they do tend to like somewhere to hide a little bit, but northern birds, they're just not bothered. They'll nest in a canary nest pad, they'll nest in anything. So a good idea, if you want to see the birds going about their activities and then you can keep a better eye on them, is just put a small amount of cover in the aviary around the nest site and you can see everything going on. The nest sites themselves, you're probably better with a little bit of Leylandii and a wicker nest basket behind it, fixed behind it. Sometimes we use willow, get about 10 or 12 strands of willow, cable tie them 18 inches apart with a good 6 inches sticking out either end, and then work the basket into that and just fasten it up securely. Couple of small cable ties into the basket and round the willow just to stop it moving around, and it's ideal. You can just put it in the aviary there, put a little bit of Leylandii around it if you wish, and bingo, they're in and out of there. Redpolls will do it, your bullies, most British birds will use the same sort of methods. The methods that you see on this DVD regarding breeding the bullfinches and the hybrids, it's the same sort of routine with virtually any finch. I scramble my eggs. I put a couple of teaspoonfuls of either water or cod liver oil into the egg, give it a good whisking and nuke it for 2 minutes. On the run up to the breeding season, it's best to give the bullfinches and all the other birds this egg food a couple of times a week, and then it gets them used to it, ready for rearing the young ones. If you do more than 2 eggs at a time, you probably have to do them a little bit longer than 2 minutes. Break the scrambled eggs up and then it cools quicker. I prefer to use Quaco Classic. As soon as the eggs are cool enough to put your hand in, mix the egg food with the egg. If you leave the egg too long before you do this, it goes rubbery. Mixing your egg food this way and not using milk, it'll last all day without going sour. You won't need to keep changing it 2 or 3 times a day in hot weather. I buy a bog standard soak seed, but I add my own teasel and some Niger to it. I soak all my seed in Vanadine V18. I put it into a fairy liquid bottle to stop it spilling. It's easier just to give it a quick squirt, and it stops it getting everywhere because it does stain surfaces. The secret weapon when breeding most of these birds, in particular the bullfinches, are frozen peas, in particular the small ones. Just tip them into a cup, add some warm water, not boiling, just warm, and leave them for a few minutes. After 5 minutes, the peas will go nice and soft and can be fed straight to the birds as they are. They're an absolute brilliant rearing food. Most pairs will get on with their breeding activities straight away. Coconut fibre and sisal baling string, chopped up into 3-inch lengths, should be provided for the main nesting material. If these birds are going to build a natural nest, small birch twigs should also be supplied. Two wicker nest baskets are supplied to each pair. Usually 4 to 6 eggs are laid, and these are only removed if there's a problem. Sometimes you get parents that actually eat the eggs. This is one thing you've got to be aware of. The incubation period is normally 13-14 days. You'll find when breeding these northern bullfinches that quite a lot of body feathers will be moulted at the beginning of the breeding season as the weather begins to warm up. This is natural because northern birds carry a lot more feather than our British ones. The flights are 6 foot deep, 6 foot high and 3 foot wide. A solid roof is fitted to the aviaries in order to provide the birds with shelter from the rain. Northern bullfinches in particular don't like the damp weather. I'm a great believer in dandelion, whether it be the heads, the leaves or even the roots. They'll eat the whole plant. All birds, all finches will eat the whole plant and should be given it whenever possible. It's strange that sometimes they can have 6 youngsters in one nest, and at other times they're left with a single one, as in this case. Even so, it was reared successfully, as they often are. Mealworms are readily taken by most bullfinch pairs and should be given when the young are in a small stage. You can see this pastel brown cock with his food pouches full, ready to feed those hungry youngsters. When there's a good pair bond, both parents fly up to the nest together and feed them as a pair. These are the same 6 youngsters as you saw in the nest. Whenever sow thistle becomes available, you can give them loads of it. I just pull loads and loads of heads off and chuck a carrier bag into each aviary every few days. Bicycle valve rubber is placed over the ring when it's put on the chick. This helps prevent the young one from being thrown out by the parents. When the young leave the nest, you just have to be careful and keep your eye open that the cock isn't bashing them about too much. When they're ready to fend for themselves, he'll start to push them away and you'll notice a few marks above the beak. You'll probably notice that these aren't actually the young from this pair. They were fostered out. This pair reared them, but they were from another pair. You would be disappointed if you bred all these normals from a pastel brown cock. You must keep your eye on your cock bullfinches to make sure they don't start bashing the hens about and driving them while they're actually sat on the first or second round eggs. I love to see these young bullfinches swaggering after the parents begging for food. These 2 young are a normal on the left and a brown on the right.
When you notice young ones spending a lot of time on the floor once they're flying well, it's very often a case that the cock is knocking them about a little bit, so it's best to keep your eye on them. Generally, at 4 weeks old, the young are ready to be removed from the parents. It's that time of year now when everything starts to look a little bit scruffy as they start the molt. Once the young are feeding themselves and split off from the parents, it's best to get them on colour food straight away. I use Carophil Red in the drinking water. If you're like me, you're looking at these birds coming through the molt and thinking, I don't want to see too many with a red breast, because I'm looking for producing bullfinch hens for hybridising with. The laurel you can see in this aviary was only put in to try and protect the inmates from the hot weather. You'll notice here that one or two have just got a few feathers missing off the top of the head where they've suffered a little bit of night fright. When you get a lot of youngsters in here in an aviary like this and one of them starts, it kicks them all off. But as you can see here, they'll come good in the end. The feathers will grow back and they show the quality of the youngsters. Look at that hen. As you get towards the end of the summer, berries come available. You should give them as many as you can. Blackberries and rowan in particular. Rowan are very common nowadays. Most public places have had rowan, or as it's called, mountain ash, planted. So you can go to your local park and probably fill a bag. My local park is full of mountain ash trees. There's 200 acres here to have a go at, and loads of mountain ash and other trees with berries on. This was taken in December and there was still a few berries on it, although there was tons of them in the summertime. I just wanted to go down and show you what these mountain ash trees look like and how many berries you can get on them. I try to avoid using berries or anything off the floor, especially in the park. Only pick the berries off the trees. These pastel browns are beautiful birds. Look at this hen. And a pastel brown cock as well. This is a pastel brown cock, young one. They've all got to tighten up a little bit, these birds, yet. They're all young, only just through the molt. Another few weeks will make a hell of a lot of difference. I like to use hazel perches. I wouldn't cut them from the park though unless you've got permission. I go down to some waste ground down the river where I can cut my hazel.
I can't move on to the next section of this DVD without airing my views on northern birds and showing. I think it's ludicrous that people won't accept northern bullfinches onto the show bench. I've heard people say, if northern birds come on the show bench, I'll throw my show cages away, that's the end of it. What a load of bum. People should be encouraging more birds, not less, onto the show bench. This year in particular, there's less birds being shown. Some people have only got themselves to blame. Northern bullfinches come here every winter, whether it be in small numbers or large numbers. Foreign birdmen don't want them in the foreign section like some British birdmen think they should be. If you want to sell them or exhibit them, they've got to be close rung. If you pick up any of these magazines, Bird Watching and Bird Watch, you look through these magazines in the winter months and see how many mealy redpolls there are over here. They probably compare with northern bullfinches. I can't understand why one's in, one's out. It's like the crossbills. Common crossbills, Scottish crossbills, parrot crossbills stay here all year round. They breed here. There's more parrot crossbills breeding in Scotland than what there is Scottish crossbills. Two-barred crossbills, you get one or two reportings over here of two-barred crossbills, but nobody says anything about a two-barred crossbill. They can be shown, go for best in show, because they're not going to win much. Crossbills in general don't win much. Hybrids do. Crossbills, straight crossbills, you rarely see them win a show, so we'll have them in. But while show numbers are dropping, I think that it would be a wise move to have northern bullfinches in the British classes. Not against the British bullfinch. There should be British bullfinch section, northern bullfinch section, British hybrids, northern hybrids, but both compete for best in show. And that's the only way you're going to stop all this crossing the two and trying to breed what we call chits, 50-50, northerns, British, and muling with them, and then hybridising with them, and they're just getting a mixed up gene pool, and it's not helping nobody. But half a dozen people in the country are stopping them from coming on the show bench. If you go to Belgium, you'll see 200-300 bullfinches in one show, but you're lucky to see 200-300 British birds in one show over here. We're just not looking at it in the right direction, I don't think. I honestly don't know what the answer is. This debate rolls on and it rolls on, and 4, 5, 6 people in the country that are right at the top of the showing level, they're stopping them from being on. yet they've got them in their shed. Funnily enough, most people have got a Siberian Goldie Cock or Northern Goldie Cock. They'll accept the Goldie Mule, but they won't accept any bullfinch hybrids. Hypocrites? I don't know.
Here we move on to breeding mealy redpolls. It's another species that is fairly easy to breed. This particular pair, that both parents were left in to rear the young ones, and in actual fact the first round young helped to rear the second round young. Sometimes the cock is best removed. It's individual choice really, but you're better just keeping an eye on your pair. Just follow the same methods that you do for breeding bullfinches, and these redpolls are just as easy to breed. The only thing that redpolls will not eat is peas. They're not too keen on peas at all. You may have to provide other green food. Redpolls must be one of the easiest British birds to breed. They're certainly the one that I would recommend for beginners to start with. We found that the sow thistle found on the set-aside fields was covered in black fly. So we were chucking a whole plant in for these little birds. All the young birds that required ringing this year, the ring was covered with the bicycle valve rubber to help stop the parents from throwing the young out. It hides the ring from the parents. Because the rubber is virtually the same colour as the baby bird's leg, the parents just ignore it. The breeding results we get from these secluded aviaries is much better than an aviary where there's too much activity going on outside, where the birds are distracted. Sound doesn't put the birds off, but visual activity spoils the breeding results. Breeding any bird is 90% common sense and 10% luck. The only thing I would say is when acquiring stock, always use unflighted birds. Unless you know the breeder very well, don't buy flighted birds. Although not entirely necessary, if you find a source of black fly and green fly, redpolls, siskins and bullfinches will devour them. As with any wild food, always be aware that it could have been sprayed. Once again, a wicker nest basket is used for these redpolls. It's just placed in a bunch of rosebay willow herb that's been tied at the bottom and tied at the top, and a basket just jammed in and a couple of cable ties to keep it in position. Another favourite food with redpolls is pinky maggots, scalded and then frozen down in little blocks. We don't particularly use them, but I know friends that do use them with great success. Here's a young redpoll now feeding its younger sisters and brothers. The beauty about breeding redpolls is the speed in which they grow. No sooner have they hatched than they seem to be ready to leave the nest. Although it's common to hear of first round birds feeding the second round, it's the first time that I've actually seen it on film. If you have got an impatient nature, redpolls would have to be the bird for you, because everything happens so fast with them. The eggs hatch fast, the young leave the nest fast, everything happens fast. You can actually see the black fly being regurgitated for these youngsters by their older sister or brother. Millet, hung from the aviary roof, gives the birds plenty of exercise and it's one of their favourite foods. Both lesser redpolls and mealy redpolls demolish these millet sprays in a matter of hours. keeping these birds in aviaries and giving them food like this that keeps them active, keeps the birds fit. Obviously, for showing purposes, these birds would have to be brought in and put in cages and fattened a little bit. The show standard lesser redpoll, I think everybody knows what they're looking for. A small, cobby, dark brown, well marked bird. With the mealy redpoll, it's a little bit different because there's so many subspecies. Some of them are pale, some of them are dark. And I think everybody looks for something a little bit different. If you're looking to use a redpoll for mules or hybrids, I would prefer a lesser redpoll. A lesser redpoll is going to give you better colour in your hybrid or mule. Alder is a very common tree. It's the only British tree that drops its leaves without them changing colour. It drops them while they're green, but not early as you would think. This one here is the first week in December. These mealy redpoll youngsters taking a bath now are the ones you saw in the nest a few clips back. If you wanted to sex these youngsters now, the only real way to do it is pluck some of the breast feathers out and then colour feed them again, and the new feathers will come through red if they're a cock. Goldfinch cross redpoll is fairly easy to breed. Unfortunately, the camera had slipped a little bit here. It would have been nice to get the footage of both these parents feeding the birds at the same time instead of just the top of the heads, but I still thought it was worthwhile putting this clip in. Breeding mules and hybrids and footage like this proves to the authorities that we are actually breeding these birds and not, like a lot of people say, taking them from the wild. For anyone wanting to breed mules and hybrids for the first time, I don't think you can beat the goldfinch cross redpoll. It makes a nice little show bird and they're excellent little singers too. Unfortunately, the cock goldfinch would never come to the nest when the camera was in position. It would have been nice to get him feeding the youngsters too. Remarkably, this hen redpoll wouldn't take anything except soak seed. She reared these 5 chicks entirely on soak seed. It would be worth trying this hen with a nest full of Siberian goldfinches. I bet she would rear 'em no trouble. The only thing is with these mules and hybrids, both parents have got to be spot on fitness. 100% fit, otherwise you're just wasting your time. The beauty of a cross like this is that you don't need foster parents. When you're breeding these easier hybrids, the parents rear their own. This is the type of hen you need though, one that cleans the youngsters up and feeds them non-stop. It's a good idea to put an electric fence over your aviary. This will keep cats away. You can't expect birds to be as settled as this if you've got cats coming on top of the aviary. It's nice to see a nest of 5 healthy young hybrids, rather than the 1s and 2s you get with some species. When you're trying to breed hybrids, a lot of the time you're only producing 1 or 2 full eggs in a nest. Once again, common sense. Look how this branch is placed so that the parents can feed the youngsters easily. If it's a nest with no branch over it, it's difficult for the parents to get onto the edge of the nest and feed these youngsters. Just use a little bit of common sense and put branches where the birds will need them. Depending on what sort of drinkers you have for these birds, I use plant pot bases, but always make sure when the youngsters get to this stage that there's a few stones in the water pot and then they can't get in and drown. These young goldfinch cross redpolls, the ones with the white forehead, turned out to be the young cocks. Look how much these little rascals have grown just in a couple of days. Once again, chlorophyll red in the drinking water is used to colour feed these birds. Some do the redpoll in shape and some take after the goldfinch. Next year these birds will look a lot different. They'll get the red breast like the redpoll cock does. Which one would you keep? There's a couple of little crackers in here. The goldfinch cross bullfinch and the linnet cross bullfinch must be the two most produced bullfinch hybrids. I don't think you see many goldfinch cross bullfinches that are actually reared under the parents, the true parents. We prefer to use these Irish bred hens for hybrid producing. They've got a nice rich chocolatey colour and they throw it into the young too. This particular line of bullfinches has been bred for 6 years. They were produced from 2 really good Irish imported cockbirds. During this filming, the cock goldfinch never came down to feed these youngsters once. We were hoping that, as in Victor Carr's book, the cock and hen would be filmed at the side of each other feeding the young. We were quite lucky in one respect that both these young turned out to be cockbirds, although one did die during the moult. It's not a bad idea to scrape a little bit of cuttlefish onto the egg food. Getting full eggs off this hybrid is the easy part. Having a pair of birds that can rear them is the secret. I bred a redpoll cross bullfinch this year. I hatched two. The first one that hatched in the first nest was an Isabel, which must have been a hen because it was a carrier cock. I didn't even know it was a carrier cock. You can tell this youngster's got bullfinch in it, the way it's swaggering back into typical young bully fashion. One thing I was very pleased about with this hybrid, he was a proper little showman. This bird's only been shown once and it's already had its knockers. All as I can say is, try and breed one. This isn't the best footage in the world. It's a little bit that I found while I was making this new DVD. It's a bit from last year and it shows the cross bullfinch that I bred. It's the first cock of this cross that's been bred in this country. My mate Dale bred a hen a couple of years ago.